Mm, 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 mm. Parang pumayat ka nga eh, no?
Kulang pa, sir. Kulang pa.
Push pa, push.
Push pa.
Ano ba target mo?
Mabalik lang yung prior pandemic.
Ano ba
Mat
yon?
matanggal lang, sir, yung mga ano, yung mga nadagdag nung kakaupo. May specific target, tina-target ako eh. Dito, sa may bandang amin.
Baka naman pinaala, ano yan, ala J-Lo.
Wala ako nung balakang ni J-Lo.
O ala Alice Dixon yan.
Yes.
Yun.
Papagala tayong age, sir. Alice Dixon.
Okay, sharing. Alas, Pix Pro na.
Aga ni Mike ka. Hi, Mike.
Magandang hapon, Mr. Mike. Talagang maaga si Mike. Ay, ano ba yan? Mr. Tebo, good afternoon. And Yomi, good afternoon. Admit. Got it. VP Alex, nandiyan ka na ba?
Dito na, Mr. Chair. IC ko lang yung background ko, ha. Dali lang, ha.
Okay, game.
Baka mali na naman ako ng background.
Hi,
Mr. Gerald, good afternoon, bro. Kami na. Hindi natin mabati yung iba, hindi natin makita no, kung sino.
Hindi ba pwede makita yun? Hindi, no?
Hindi, magparamdam kayo yung mga iba.
Yes. Para makita namin, sana
Type lang kayo
mag-comment.
kahit ano, guys. Good afternoon, happy Friday. Para lumabas yung pangalan nyo. Ay,
Lagay nyo yung ano, area nyo. Shout out natin kung
Yes.
nasaan kayo.
Alas 5
Hello, good
na.
afternoon. Mr. Mons. Mons Tax is watching. Good afternoon. Saan ka ba? Saan ka ba, Mons? Siguro Raymond, siguro siya, no? Wala pa yung guest speaker natin. Uy, Isabela. Ayos ah.
Arnold Dava is watching. Hi, Arnold. Kamusta?
Arnold and Gina Resh. Yung Isabela, di ba nandyan yata yung, ito lang masiguro, no? Kung dyan ba yung sinasabi nila noon na gas station na may pinakamalinis na ano na CR.
siya.
Ah,
Oo. Hindi ko lang masiguro. Pinuntahan namin yun eh. Talagang ang linis nga naman. Good afternoon, Berna. Mr. Noel Orozco, good afternoon.
Pinsan ko yan, ha.
Pinsan mo yun?
Oo, pinsan ko yun.
Ayos ah. Ngayon, interesting yung ano natin, no? Malware naman ngayon.
yes.
Mr. Felix Maratas Corvera. Afternoon. Friday na naman. Oh, si Ian nandyan na. Okay. Eric De Jesus, Mr. Christopher, good afternoon din sa'yo. Si Frederick Bonda, nandyan na. Good afternoon, brother. Ito ang pinaka-siga sa Trend Micro Philippines, nandyan na.
Yes.
Mr. Ian.
The one and only.
The one and only. Uy, si Noel Amuin. Nag-login
Good
na.
afternoon.
Afternoon, bro.
Good afternoon, sir.
Si Pamela Bakay is also watching. Good afternoon, Pam.
G, thank you for watching. Good afternoon.
Mr. Angelo De Guzman.
Uy, G, good afternoon.
Napaka-pogi mo daw. Oh. Itong bata mo talagang si Mike Matrito. Pogi daw yung boss niya. Oh. Puro malware tayo ngayon.
Sa Facebook Live pala, boss, no? Kasi,
Oo, nasa Facebook Live tayo. Mamaya may-
Mag-ingat uli. Tumataas na naman ang cases natin.
Oo. Pero ang hindi kasi nila sinasama sa reports is yung na hospital ba, nag-severe ba,
Hmm.
'di ba? Kasi mukhang wala namang panic yata sa mga hospitals.
Yes. Which is good. Although nakakatakot lang, Mr. Chair, kasi baka nawawala na ng effectivity yung mga booster natin.
Yun lang. Pero hindi naman siguro ganoon ka-severe. Mr. Anjo, brother, good afternoon. Miss Emily Tabiliran Castillo, good afternoon.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
India Fujitsu, is it?
Mamaya may interview na naman kay Alvin El Chico about smishing.
Ikaw, Mr. Chair?
Saan?
Live,
Anong oras?
live.
Manonood kami.
Manonood kami.
8:40 yata yung SRO, di ba?
Yes.
Bia, oy si Bia. Nanonood si Bia, bro Alex.
Uy,
Bia
via...
Feliciano, nakita ko siya doon sa CICC, sila ni ma'am niya, no? Sila Tin and yung buong team nila sa Dominguez. Oo. Nasa Boracay yan si Bia. Nakita ko yung post niya, Boracay. Bakit ka bakit ka naka-login?
Mr. Chair nung sino ba yun? Yung kasama na yung lalaki? Nakalimutan ko na yung...
Alvin yata, Alvin. Uy,
Alfie.
Noemi. Nandyan si Noemi. Talagang very supportive. Riz, magandang hapon. Yung ating golf balls, gamitin natin yon. Tawa-tawa si Bia, oh. Bia, nasa Boracay ka tapos naglalaging ka sa kwentuhang cybersecurity. Na-miss mo talaga kami, no?
Habang habang umiinom.
Mr. Alvin Malikdem. Oh, magandang pastime tong kwentuhang cybersecurity. Kasi magaganda at pogi yung nasa...
Ito naman, Mr. Chair.
Advantage tayo kasi tayo nandito.
Nauna tayo.
Mr. June Versosa. Nasaan na yung natin? Iyan, ka? Naka-unmute. Naka-mute ka.
Kaya pala. So ito, hindi lang yan, Mr. Chair. Advantage natin. Hindi sila makakapagsalita. Kaya lang, Walang makakaangat.
Bro, hinaan mo yung ano mo, yung isang monitor mo ng Facebook.
Okay, gotcha.
Hinaan mo yung speaker para hindi tayo magano.
There you go.
Mr. Joe Nulso. Oh. Hello, paring Ian daw, sabi ni Riz. Ian, oh.
Oo. Kumari ko to, boss eh.
Ang mga out of country, out of region, out of Manila, message nyo kung nasan kayo para malaman namin yung location nyo. Ha?
Ako shout out lang namin kayo dito.
Si Ben Isra Dakudao, nandyan na naman siya. Magandang hapon. Kapix Prong Ben. Gel Rags. Wala pa yung natin, expert natin?
Tanungin natin si country manager, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, mini-message ko na, boss.
Sabi ni June Versosa, ang ganda ni Miss Miraples. Aba,
Uy, June.
may pila ka bro, pila.
Number, kailangan na ba sa queue? Pang-5 na.
Mr. Expert.
Sarah Jane Banies, Ashley Escorpeso, good afternoon. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. So, hinihintay lang natin ang ating expert, no? Pag-uusapan natin ngayon, malware.
Very tight.
Ang maganda dito sa malware, very technical siya, pero lahat nakaka-relate. Kasi lahat nabibiktima ng malware. Miss San, oy, si San, nandyan si San, Stellar.
Ay, si San.
Mr. Chair, kailangan daw pong i-admit.
Ay, sorry. Andito pala. Ako pala ang may kasalanan. Sorry. Pati si President Ace pala nandun naghihintay.
Mr. Chair, 4:30 pa daw sila nakadialin eh.
Sorry. Si Ashley pala, nakadating sa Ildefonso sa Bigan. Babalik kami dyan, bro. Sir Lorenzo Anda. President Ace, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Ay, good afternoon. Majority tayo ngayon ah. Si Paolo is there already. Paolo, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Si Micaela. Micaela, are you there, Micaela?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, take the floor, VP Mia and VP Alexis.
Okay, magandang hapon. Again, it's 5 p.m. na. So, alas 6 po na. Salamat again sa pagpunta nyo. Today, we will discuss a very timely topic about malware threat evolution. So, VP Mia, you want to give a background ng topic?
Yes, thank you, VP Alex. Actually, I like that we are discussing this topic, that we have today because, one, we will be able to share the fundamentals, particularly on the topic of malware. So for those who doesn't know what malware is, our guest speaker will explain that later. And for those who have been in the industry for years, it kind of allows us to, step back and be reminded of the basics and understand how the threat landscape has evolved. So I believe our speaker will share with us the different types of threats and how they can affect actually both enterprise and consumer. Understanding these threats will enable us to define security problems created by each classification, the techniques that they use, and the different solutions that can be used to counter these attacks. But before I introduce our guest speaker, I just also would like to make mention, we are fortunate to have also today Of course, the country manager of Trend Micro, Mr. Ian Felipe. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank
Pogi,
you.
oh,
Thank you for
pogi.
having us. Yun. We're very happy to be part of Pixpo. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Excited kami.
Yeah. And we also have Micaela Minencio with us today. And for our speaker, we have Mr. Paulo Villegas. Paulo is the
So,
head of global product for Trend Micro and has been with the company for wow, 12 years now. Paulo started as parang mataas magpasweldo si Mr. Ian Felipe, 12 years. Paulo started as a frontline engineer for the small and medium business support and eventually got promoted to senior SE or systems engineer a year after. He also took on a role as an escalation support of all malware related matters for 5 years lang naman. He is now part of the global product management to support both commercial and support teams in order to provide in-depth knowledge of the solutions based on current threat landscape. So, let's start the discussion already, Paulo. Over to you.
uh, sir, sir, pwedeng pa naka-disable sir yung screen share.
Okay na. Na-enable na.
Yan. So, share screen. All right. So, everybody can see my screen.
Yep, we can see it, Paulo.
Yes, yes.
All right. So, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Miss Mia. It's an honor to be here. So, in today's session, I would like to present to you the most basic form of cyber threat, and that would be the malware and how it actually came to be. Now, for those who are currently joined right now, that it's very much new to the cybersecurity industry, malware is basically the umbrella term that describes any software, firmware, or code independent to perform a malicious or unauthorized process that will have an adverse impact on the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of the system. Well, basically, in basic terms, a malware is something that would cause harm to your computer. It could eventually stop it. It could eventually steal anything from your data. Pretty much anything that has to do with uh, stealing data, doing destruction, the ransomware, you can go ahead and correlate this with the malware. Now, many of you may think that malware is now irrelevant because of all the new types of cyber threats, and it requires very little to no attention because we already have the antivirus, we have the different kinds of other security measures, zero trust, which is not exactly a product, but of course a philosophy. But then again, it does help very greatly with the cyber threat. But what I would like to mention the most or drive something home is that even though malware has been around for 40 years and then it's seen a decline, it's still one of the top 15 cyber threats from INISA report. So in the recent report by INISA or the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, malware is still one of the top cyber threats that we need to look out for. Now, the threat of malware appears consistently no matter how many times our technology change, with new families and strains emerging every year, right? Imagine every year for the last 40 years, despite the laudable efforts of law enforcement to take them down. Now, malware basically started very basic, which we're going to be discussing later on. So, from a very basic beginning, imagine all these new threats, web attack, phishing, web application, spam, DDoS, and such. They all came from a humble beginning from a malware. All right. So basically, a malware comes in three general terms. So there are actually a lot, but I would just like to get you to the basic. So the very basic of malware. So generally, there's three types of malware: the virus, the worm, and the Trojan or Trojan horse. There's actually a fourth classification of malware called the blended threat. It's usually just a combination of these three. But what I would like to drive home in this is on any type of situation, regardless of what cyber threat you're facing, you're going to see a remnant of a malware, regardless if it's a fileless or a phishing or again a DDoS, a bot attack. You will see a remnant of that malware. And then what I would like you to realize is that even though the threats are new, you will still find a pattern. You will still eventually go back to some of these malware behaviors or activities. Now let's start with the very first, the virus. Now the virus is actually a type of malware that's like what in every other human. So it needs a host. It attaches itself to a legitimate file. In order for it to execute, run a particular activity or malicious activity, it needs for the host to execute. Now, for you to be able to clean a particular virus, you need an AV software. So unless, of course, you are a antivirus developer, a programmer, you're very much familiar with the code. If you're just a simple user, the best way to eradicate a virus is with an AV software. Now, they usually say prevention is better than cure. That's very much true. That's why, in order for you to eradicate a virus or make sure that your system is safe, having an AV software is tantamount. Now, on newer systems, unlike before, especially in Windows 10, we already have a built-in AV software, the Windows Defender. Now, the downside of it is there are some viruses or some sort of malicious behavior that can go ahead and disable this antivirus softwares. Now, we do have what we call the watchdogs that can go ahead and re-enable this and make sure that your AV softwares are continually running to make sure that if there's a virus infection, right, it would be able to stop it. Now, I want you to remember this one because I've told you that malware has different kinds of behavior, right? At the end of the day, eventually, knowing what type of malware is hitting you will greatly help you on your everyday job. So this is one of them, virus. Next is we have the worm. So worm is the most common type of malware. Pretty much it consumes the bandwidth and overload the web servers most often than not. So how does the worm work? Well, basically the worm works as exploiting the vulnerabilities. What does this mean? Well, basically it means that if your system is vulnerable, you can expect that the primary attack the campaign users or attackers will use is the worm. Why? Worm can go ahead and replicate itself without user intervention. And the best way to get into a system is find those vulnerabilities that you can exploit. So most often than not, during the reconnaissance, if you're familiar with MITRE, if they're going to use a particular malware to go ahead and get into your system, do reconnaissance, and then make sure that they keep persistence, infect as much PC as possible, rest assured that it's the worm that's they're going to be their go-to malware. If you would like to defend against a particular worm, so there's actually a lot of different types. There's been worm down ad, disaster worm, right? Uh, it's been very rampant since the very beginning of the malware era up to this day. Now, why? Why is that? Well, basically, even up to this day, IoTs, new softwares are coming out. There's still a lot of ways that you can do exploits. That's why Worm is very successful. Every time that there's an exploit that can be, or a vulnerability rather, that can be exploited, you can be rest assured that the worm can go ahead and exploit that vulnerability. So, what would be the best way to go ahead and defend against a worm? Simple, patching. That's why it's very important for most companies, enterprises, to make sure that you have a particular individual or a particular group that do patch management. Because most often than not, the cleanup of a worm is very hard if you don't have patches on your system. You will see constant alerts. You're going to go ahead and have multiple users calling at you, especially on the SOC team or the IT team, that, hey, we're getting these alerts and it doesn't stop. Now, that's a big problem with the worm. Based from experience, if a worm hits a particular company, it will not stop until you find or patch a particular system. So it will keep replicating and replicating until such a time that you've completely patched the system and, of course, have an AV to eradicate the worm. All right. So next, we do have the Trojan. So Trojan, as it's self explanatory, the Trojan horse, if you're familiar with the story, disguises itself as a legitimate file. So what it does is usually it brings the payload in. So most often than not, if I would like to get a particular system, use social engineering, I would use a Trojan. What's going to happen here is if an unsuspecting user click on a particular file, it's going to go ahead and drop that payload. So normally, as I've said, it uses social engineering, human weakness to go ahead and get into the system. Now, what happens here if I'm an attacker? My, my I'm sorry, my way to get into the system would definitely be use a Trojan. After I use a Trojan, I go ahead and drop into the system. And then what I would carry mostly is a worm type of malware. So that's when I get into the system, I would try to infect as much system as possible to gain persistence. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to make sure that I would run. So either I use also a virus, still stay with the worm, and then that way I would go ahead and have persistence and then constantly get information from within the system. So as I was mentioning, so with the blended threat, right? Trojan, virus, worm all together, this is the most common attack that we see nowadays. APTs within the ransomware, botnet. So the behavior of Trojan, virus, and the worm are all incorporated with this. So as I mentioning a while ago, if a particular attack happens, I would start with a Trojan to get into the system, use a worm behavior to go ahead and infect most of the system, and then use a virus to make sure that when a user click on a particular file, I would execute. Now you may ask, how are these particular malware behaviors useful to me? Well, the answer is very simple. Knowing the enemy, right? If you know how to deal with a particular malware or infection, it would be much easier for you to go ahead and defend your defend your perimeter or defend your workspace. Now, in case you would like to know more about how this malware works, there's still a lot, but the most basic function is this: virus infects a host. So automatically, if you see a particular file doing something it's not supposed to be, chances are it's a virus. Now, if a particular system or an entire group of computers is showing malicious behavior or malicious activity, chances are you might already be dealing with a worm. And then if you see something that's not supposed to be there, chances are it's a Trojan. Now, in cybersecurity, especially in threat hunting, so the difference between staying or working on a ticket in just 1 minute or staying an entire week or scouring for tiny amounts of data is the difference between finding out if it's a false positive, it's knowing the enemy or knowing what type of malware hit you. If you're still not yet convinced, so let's take a little trip down the memory lane. Now, the very first virus, actually, it's more of a worm, is the creeper. So it was first developed in 1971 by Bob Thomas. So creeper might as well be the very first computer virus, but its action is actually a worm because it's able to replicate from one computer to another. Right? Now fast forward going from 2004, 2007 all the way to the present, it's very much still rampant that the actions of the malwares of old virus trojans, worms is still very much visible to APTs, ransomware, phishing. So you will notice the behavior of the first malwares still very much incorporated on the attacks now. Let's go ahead and take one example, right? Now, Onel de Guzman. So this is a college student way back in 2000. I think most of our senior members our astound members in PixPro is well aware of where I'm going with this one. He actually placed the Philippines in the world spotlight because of the I Love You worm that he did. Now, if you must know, one of the activities of the I Love You worm is to look out for victims' Microsoft Outlook address book and send it out or send those emails out impersonating the victims and replicating itself as an attachment. Now, this method of targeting an address book and impersonating them in an email is still used by much recent threat actors as part of their tradecraft, specifically the Emotet. Now, the Emotet was initially built as a banking Trojan or was discovered way back 2014. So imagine 14 years after, right? The behavior of the worm that was built before by Onel de Guzman is still being used by modern threats. So pretty much like if you're familiar with Star Wars, Luke, I am your father. So it's pretty much the same thing. What the threat actors right now are using is the very same thing that has been developed many, many years back. They're just using the very same techniques. They're just using the very same behaviors. It just so happens that they're combining them together, making it more sophisticated. But either ways, there's a pattern on how it happens. Now, what are the key takeaways that I would like to impart on this particular short sharing of mine? First thing is KISS. Now, KISS stands for Keep It Simple. A trend micro term is, well, sorry for the term stupid. So keep it simple, stupid. What does this mean? It means if you particularly see a malware or see its behavior, you don't have to make it very complicated, right? All you have to do is, as the word itself, keep it simple. I see this kind of behavior, seems like a virus. I'll go ahead and use an AV software. Hmm. I see a worm. It does infect a lot of systems. It keeps on popping up. Seems to me that I'm missing a patch. I'll go ahead and patch it. If I see a particular file that's not unknown to me, I'm going to go ahead and use the AV software, scan it. I'm not going to click on it. So most likely than not, it could be a Trojan. So knowing how to defend or knowing who your enemy is at the end of the day will greatly help on how you can go ahead and do your job. Because you cannot defend anything or something that you do not know. And thirdly, bringing the right tools for the job. So the right tools would be the AV softwares for virus, patching for worm, and then again, antivirus software, or just even on the old days, you can just go ahead and delete a particular file that's not known to you as long as you can go ahead and verify that it's a Trojan or it's doing something malicious. Actually, there's a fourth takeaway on this, and that would be choosing the right partner. When I say choosing the right partner, basically this is choosing the right people or the right partner for your job, mainly which is having an AV software that you can go ahead and trust. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is on a particular environment or in a particular company, there are four kinds of different sleeping positions. If there's no malware attack or there's no breach, CEO sleeps very tightly. Same thing with the CFO or the COO. But the one that's actually defending the perimeter is the CISO. So no matter what happens, if a CISO would have a very good partner in their security, definitely you would see him in this bed. And that's why I would like to introduce to you Trend Micro. So Trend Micro is basically my company. So it's very nice that we have actually joined PixPro. We have been in the industry for the past 30 years, and increasingly we have solutions coming from endpoint, from network, especially messaging, the cloud, and even for IoTs. Now, with 30 years over the industry, we're able to provide layered solutions for banking industry, for telecommunications. We are able to also provide even those for sensitive softwares and CSPMs. Now, I would actually like to pass this on with Ian if he would like to share more or anything about Trend Micro before we can go ahead and continue with the question and answer.
Paulo, go ahead. Actually, just finish all the slides and then do the closing.
Yeah, I'm actually good with this, Ian. I'm already good with my presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much, Paulo. So, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I would like to share my message to all our improvements.
Right.
Thank you.
Actually, the master of ceremony is VP Alex.
Oh, VP Alex.
Go ahead, Ian. Go ahead.
No, I just no. Actually, before we close actually the session, this is actually a very good opportunity para sa amin sa Trend Micro. We are very happy. First of all, thank you to Expo for this opportunity. We've been looking forward to be part of this with Kuman in cybersecurity. As everybody knows, Trend Micro has been in the Philippines for 22 years already, and not only that, but globally we are 34 years already. And I just hope that Paulo was able to share at least the basic right now. So I know we have, I'm looking at the Facebook Live now, we have 7,000 viewers, right? 7,000 viewers right now. Maraming salamat po sa mga nakikinig ngayon. And I hope meron kayong natutunan and meron kayong napulot sa sharing ng channel. Because that's how we wanted to share first the basic. It's very important for us to understand. Right now, we are experiencing so many cyber threats, so sometimes it's a very good opportunity to share that there are generally three types of malwares. Of course, the virus, worm, the Trojan, and their threats that they're take away right now with the presentation is for you to understand all this and for you to be sabi nga kanina, the most important thing na nakuha ko kanina sa message ko, the most important thing para sa ating lahat is know your enemy. If you don't know your enemy, if you don't know what's happening, most likely you might be able, you may have the most sophisticated solution that you are implementing. You don't understand what's happening, then most likely you might fail in the correct solution. With all these applications, all these cyber threats that is happening right now, what is important is for you to know that you should not do it by yourself. Kailangan gawin ba sila? Next important thing is for you to understand this, and next is to partner with someone who can help you as well. And you know, sabi nga nila, there's human is an island, wala nakakalam ng lahat talaga. And this is where the partnership comes in. And this is what Trend Micro is offering to all our listeners and to all our partners and customers. I'm not really sure. I know there are students, right? And there are also professionals in this body. And from Trend Micro perspective, number one, if you are students, if you are graduate students, and you are, or a fresh graduate, number one, I encourage you to be part of the cybersecurity partners. We are a group of people who will help us, who will help the industry. And we are, as Trend Micro, we are offering a very good opportunity to be that cybersecurity. Just like Paulo. Paulo is now Trend Micro for 12 years, and I'm pretty sure he started with now very good cyber from Trend. And secondly, if you are a customer, and if you are handling the cybersecurity of the company, then these things.
Bro Ian, sayang yung mga sinasabi mo kasi medyo may noise ka sa background mo. Yung iba, hindi masyadong maintindihan. Kami, parang maganda yung mga messages mo eh.
Thank you, sir. How about this now? Is this better? Inilapit ko yung microphone.
Yun. O, nilalapit pala yan sa labi.
May ambient noise ka pa rin bro, mayroong static sa
Ganun pa
likod.
rin.
Pero yan, mas okay na yan ngayon na nandyan.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was mentioning a while ago, if you are a student, if you are a fresh graduate, if you are very interested to be a cybersecurity expert, you are invited to Trend. We call ourselves trenders. In the Philippines, Trend Micro is the biggest cybersecurity company. 1,200 workforce in the Philippines, and that's how Trend Micro invested in the country. That's how Trend Micro believes in the Filipino skills as well as talents. Encourage you to be part of our space. If you are a customer, a cybersecurity profession or professional handling the security portion of the company, what Trend Micro is offering is partnership. We have the skills, we have the ability to the correct tools and solutions that can help address all the cybersecurity. And that's it from Trend Micro. I hope you have. It was a very good afternoon na makita at makausap kayong lahat. Sana may natutunan kayo. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. Thank you.
Salamat. Thank you, Ian, for that message. No? And Paulo, thank you for the insightful presentation. No? So maganda yung present ni Paulo. He gave us the basics of the malware. No?
Yep.
And of course, just to share with you guys, ngayon kaya ako sinabi kaninang in time to kasi when I was already facing customers every day, Mr. Chair, marami tayong mga customers ngayon ang tinatamaan ng malware, so meaning tama na nagshi-ship yung attack going to the malware. What do you think, Bibi Mia?
Actually, ikaw yung, I believe ikaw yung may visibility talaga and you have exposure with a lot of customers, no?
Yes.
Meron lang akong gustong mga basahin na ibang comment. Well, hello muna, kay Delphine. Merong question si Eliarto Ferrere. Sabi niya, how to be part of your team. So, kaklarify ko lang kay Eliarto. Yung team ba na sinasabi mo, how to be part of PixPro o how to be part of Trend Micro?
Sabi mo kasi kanina, Mia, malaki magpasweldo si Trend Micro eh.
Oo nga eh.
Magaling kami mag-training. Let's put it that way. Umpisahan natin.
Bata pa lang ako, Trend Micro na yan eh. Diba? Yung mga panahon na first job ko pa lang, second job ko yun, parang gustong-gusto ko talagang magtrabaho sa Trend Micro.
Pero narinig mo ba, natatanda mo ba, Mr. Chair, yung PCC?
Oo.
Trend Micro, hindi.
Trend Micro yun, no? Ngayon, nga, tama yung tanong. Anong BP Mia? Anong team ba yung mo?
Sagutin na lang natin parehas.
Yes. So, meron tayong question from Te Bo. Question, since most of malwares now are loaded into social media platforms, meron po ba Trend Micro for Android or iOS?
We have the Trend Micro Mobile Security. So basically, as I mentioned a while ago, we have different plugins or different solutions from network to mobile to endpoint, servers, IoTs. So there is one, you can actually download it from the Google Play. It's called Trend Micro Mobile Security. So there's one for just consumers, there's one for enterprise. If you're just looking for the one for basic use, for everyday use, individual use, then you can download it directly from Google Play. Same thing with iOS, we do have for that mobile security.
Mr. Chair, VP, if you may allow us, we have Jessica Bernardo. She can talk more in depth on the products here.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Hello.
Jessica.
Good afternoon, Tapix Pro. It's nice to be here, sirs. and ma'am.
Grabe, the bigger, the merrier na talaga tayo.
Yes, sir.
Nakakatuwa pala dito, boss, para tayo nasa talk show lang.
Oo. Yung pwede kang mag-join dito every Friday kung gusto mo.
I will do that.
Oo,
It's our
kailangan
first time.
namin ng mga kasamang, kung may guest speaker, may guest host din.
Ayun.
Ha?
Yes,
Hindi ka
maganda
mag-comment.
yun,
Ayun
Mr.
naman
Chair.
pala.
Go ahead, Jessica, if you have something to share.
Okay, sir. Let me just, if I can share my screen.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, habang nag-share si Jessica, so I just would like to introduce Jessica to all our viewers. Jessica is our sales engineer from the Trend Micro team side. She's the one handling also the products of Trend Micro.
Matagal ka na din sa Trend Micro, Jessica.
Yes, sir, but not 12 years.
Not yet. Jessica, how
Ongoing
long
pa lang.
in Trend Micro?
Well, in Trend Micro, I'm around 4 years po.
Sige. For our viewers, don't stop yourself from asking questions while Jessica is sharing. We will still respond to your queries. Kung anong may question dito si Pix Pro Davao eh. Magkano ba sahod dyan sa Trend Micro? Brother, hindi natin pinag-uusapan dito mga sahod. Baka magkainitan tayo dito.
Naku, data privacy yan, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Jessica.
All right, sir. I hope you can see the screen that I'm sharing. So technically, we are Trend Micro. Sabi nga ni Paolo kanina, you need to choose a right partner that will be able to provide security and protection. So Trend Micro has been, again, in the business for 30 years, and we have expanded our portfolio. So you can see that we have expanded not only on the endpoint platforms, but we have expanded on the enterprise end-to-end. So we have solutions for your email, solutions also for your web. Another thing that Paulo has shared earlier about mobile security, we have that. If there are annoying emails or annoying messages from your phone and there is a link on that, we can actually block that using our mobile security. We also expanded to our cloud, so different technologies on cloud or native applications on cloud, like the workload security, your servers, your containers, even on other platforms on serverless. So Trend Micro has also a portfolio for that. And of course, we have network security that will be able to provide you an end-to-end solution on our network infrastructure. So we have protection on your perimeter, and eventually we also have protection on your visibility on the network. And all of this, we actually have different technologies on these different layers, and we can help you also on visibility, on monitoring of all of these different layers. So that is something that is challenging on security operations, right? And when it comes to security operations, it's very hard to have visibility. It's very hard to have telemetries, and it's very hard as well to be able to make sense everything on this security environment. So that's why Trend Micro also has a layer of services that we can offer the customers to be able to provide security operations. So all of it, of course, sabi nga ni Ian kanina, no man is an island. So that's why Trend Micro also can integrate to other third-party solutions like the one that I'm sharing with you right now. So with this, I hope we have given you, even if in a short time we have given you what Trend Micro can provide protection on different layers, and how can we actually help if you are looking for these types of solution. So again, salamat po, sir, for allowing us to be here and allowing us to share this portfolio of us. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Eka.
you, Jessica.
Jessica,
Yes.
Meron isang question dito while Jessica is here, no? Ang question is, can we virtualize your solution in any VNF hosting platform?
Okay. That's a good question, ma'am. So when it comes to virtualization, we have offered solutions for virtual environment. But maybe we can contact with the
Deep dive.
customer so that we can deep dive what is the exact requirement for that. Pero thank you for that, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you,
Can you I think Ian is also in Facebook Live. Post your email
Yeah.
in case they want to know more
Yes,
about
sir.
Trend Micro. Actually, mayroon kaming plano ni Ian na very interesting.
Yeah, babanggitin ko na sana ngayon pero hintay ko na lang talaga gusto
o pag muna baka maonsami tayo. Di ba?
Okay. Sige.
Tsaka ano ito, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao ito. Isang salbo ito, no? Yun ang kasi ang advocacy natin is to provide the highest level of security not only to enterprises but to the more vulnerable sector in our society, and these are the home and individual users, no? Yun talaga ang kailangan nating i-secure. So kailangan natin yung mga partners natin pagdating dyan sa perspective na yan. Dahil napatunayan natin nung pandemic, sila talaga yung vulnerable. Na kapag nagkaroon sila ng insidente sa mga bahay nila, these are the people, these are the users na walang matatawagan. At kung may matawagan man sila, walang pupunta sa kanila. Right? And that's, I think, more than double the population if you are going to count the devices. Kasi bawat isa sa atin, dalawa yata telepono minimum. May gadget ka pa sa bahay. Yeah. So, Trend Micro would be a perfect partner pagdating dyan sa advocacy na yan. Kasi yun yung mga isang advocacy natin is to protect the children, di ba? And because of this online learning, kids are spending longer hours connected to the internet. And that also expands the vulnerability of the child or the children. And not all parents are like us, no, na who can understand the threat, who can respond to the threat, and we have friends whom we can call, di ba? Majority of the parents wala silang alam sa ganyan. So the children are really vulnerable, and that is why we need to extend our expertise to the most vulnerable sector. Yan ang natin, advocacy natin, ha.
Ganda na, Mr. Chair. It's really an advocacy on our end. You know, kulang na kulang nga yung industriya natin para sa mga expert dito. What
Yan
more yung mga nasa bahay lang na hindi techie would never understand how they have the
Oo. No. So, batiin natin na ating mga kaibigan muna, si Chomel. Ito yung snapping sa army natin ng mga katropa.
Meron din ako.
Colonel Chomel. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Parang nalulungkot ang kwentuhan pag pinag-uusapan na yung mga vulnerable sectors kasi, no? Alam mo, ang cybersecurity is very sexy in terms of the profession, because it's the only profession where whatever you do internal to your organization, it impacts the community, especially us in telco. No? Our satisfaction is more than just the thought of protecting the telco, because we know when we are successful in doing so, it's the whole community or majority of the community, both business and home and individual users, are the ones benefiting. Kaya kahit hindi kami natutulog, kahit wala kaming holiday, kahit wala kaming weekend, okay lang kami kasi mayroong mga tao na nagbe-benefit, and that is the majority of the community, no? So very sexy siya. Pag pinag-usapan mo na yung possible targets, possible victims, nagiging malungkot. Why? Kasi we can only do so much, di ba? Tayo sa advocacy natin sa PixPro, we can try to cover areas and groups and number of people, no? Pero hindi natin talaga magawa. Ganon. Kaya nakakalungkot na gusto mong gawin, hindi mo magawa lahat.
So totoo, Mr. Chair, yung nasa presentation ni Paolo, yung CISO wala sa kama. Nasa kaya yun?
Nandun sa kabilang kama.
Tayo yan.
Pero alam mo, totoo yon kasi ang trabaho ng isang hindi lang CISO, no? Yung mga true blue cybersecurity professionals na mas kinakabahan kung tahimik. Mas nagdududa kung walang nangyayari, no? Kaya yung nandito yung mga katropa natin sa Cybersecurity Operations Group ng ng PLDT Smart, nandiyan sila. Mas kinakabahan sila kung walang busy na chat group, walang busy na yung mga tahimik na Yung nga sabi nga nung isang tropa natin diyan, kung magbakasyon siya, nagkakasakit siya eh. Pero hindi na lang siya nagbabakasyon.
And isa pang
Okay.
realization, Mr. Chair, no, if I may share, no, sa mga customers natin, for example, may customers na nandito, no, na sometimes yung mga customers hindi nila nare-realize na ang importance nitong mga nangyayari sa atin, malware, cyber attack, until mangyari sa kanila, no. Kaya dapat kami sa PixPro, we are advocating yung proactiveness in terms of cybersecurity na yun, gaya ng sabi ni Mr. Chair, we always need to be paranoid and vigilant, no? And these malwares are really serious threat right now. And more customers are getting attacked by this kind of tactics, no? So, yung dalawang customer na share ko, no, yung kanina, yung isa malware na pumasok sa email server nila na hindi nila nakita, to the point of Jessica kanina, we all need visibility. Babalik tayo rin sa visibility. Yung isa naman, ito rin, para din sa mga viewers natin, huwag kayo basta-basta mag-i-install ng mga, alam mo yun, unsafe application. So yung mga crack, so ganun yung nangyari naman doon sa isang customer ko, yung IT niya, nag-install mismo doon sa server ng isang crack application, yun doon nang galing yung malware, no? So and these malwares are evading the technologies now, no? So they're getting smarter, so we need to be more vigilant. Yun lang, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes,
Kung himayin kasi natin yan, it boils down to money, no?
Yes, totoo.
The only reason kung naalala nyo pa, kasi sabi ni Paolo kanina, yung mga senior members daw, maraming mga panahon na yon, ng mga panahon nila, no, ng mga seniors, may meaning pa ang virus noon, no?
Oo.
Vital information resource under siege. Yung mga virus.
Ganda
Pero
rin, Mr.
kung natandaan nyo, noong panahon na yon, walang masyadong malware na nag-i-infect ng Macintosh. At saka sa Linux, wala ding masyado. Lagi lang Windows. Kasi sa Windows, madaming gumagamit, di ba? So may negosyo. Nung naging affordable na sa mga tao yung iPhone, yung mga Mac OS, ayun, dumami na rin yung mga malwares, no? And even Linux during that time. Kami Linux boys kami all the way, no? Kaya tuwan-tuwa kami nung nagkaroon ng GUI yung Linux, di ba? So, nagkaroon na din kasi marami na rin gumagamit ng OS na yon. So, mas madami kang mai-infect, mas malaki yung possibility na makakuha ka ng customer, no? Lalo na ngayon na may ransomware na. 'Di ba? So, pagka dineliver yung ransomware mo sa environment mo, aabutin ka ng siyam-siyam talaga kasi pag nandiyan na yon, hindi mo na makukuha yon, no? So, very important yung patching nga na sinasabi ni Paolo. Ngayon, kung yung environment mo is impossible to patch, no? Lalo na kung highly critical, then you make sure na yung mga compensating controls mo is secured. Lalo na yung mga attack entry points. Sino ba ang nabibiktima ang nagiging source ng mga malwares? Usually, yung mga users mo kasi sila yung nagda-download, sila yung nag-access ng yung mga servers naman natin, hindi natin ginagamit to access. Well, sana hindi nyo ginagamit to access mga websites, no? So, laging may attack entry point ka na yun yung kailangan mong i-fortify.
Yeah,
So,
very true yun.
sila, Yeah, go ahead, Paolo.
Yeah, very true. That's very true, sir. No, so basically, kaya nga, my point is the basic malwares. Because usually, pag gagawa ng ticket, your users, lalo na usong-uso ngayon yung BYOD. So kung ano na nilalagay nila dyan, it's not containerized. So pag nag-report yan, minsan sabihin sa'yo, oh sir, ano ba nangyayari dito sa machine ko? Kung ano na lang yung pumapop up. Which is, kung kabisado nila yung parang behavior na umaatake sa kanila or nag-i-infect sa kanila, that way, mas madali sa IT security na sabihin, na virus ko lang po. Most likely, baka wala kang EV na nakalagay or, kumalat na dito sa system natin, worm na yan. So, kailangan na natin mag-patch. That way, hindi na po tayo magtatagal lang, tagal na natin dito, 2 oras, 3 oras na tayo nag-troubleshoot, di pa natin madali. Because we're not familiar with the behavior. So, if you're very much familiar with that, mas madali sa atin mag-troubleshoot, mas madali sa ating makapag-close ng ticket, usually, dyan sa team natin. And that way, kahit na hindi masyadong aware or not very tech savvy, kung familiar ka lang doon sa behavior, at the very least, you would know how to defend.
Yes, tama yun, no?
Yes, Mr. Chair, add ko actually may question ako doon eh. But how about for kasi now for the schools, 'di ba? Yung mga laptop ng kids na kasi ngayon may hybrid setup na eh. May days where they go to school, they connect to the Wi-Fi of the school, and then sometimes online sila. Now that device becomes now a BYOD setup, 'di ba? Kasi the kids own their laptops. So, papaano yung mga yung mga parents na hindi naman tech savvy, tapos something happened dun sa laptop, 'di ba? Parang merong na-click, na-install, kawawa naman sila. So, yun ba yung sinasabi mo, Mr. Chair, na na intention to help them?
Yun talaga. Yun talaga. In fact, matagal na naming nasa group pa namin si VP Alex nung pinupush na namin yan eh. Kasi we already had that recognition. No? We already had that understanding na yung mga malalaking companies, meron silang IT team eh. Meron silang information security team. 'Di ba? Pero itong mga vulnerable sectors natin, ito yung mga walang walang matatakbuhan. And kung yung anak mo nag-online schooling tapos ilang araw nang hindi maka-join sa online class, ang laking problema mo as a parent. Kung work from home ka tapos nawalan ka ng gagamiting laptop dahil na ransomware ka, saan ka pupunta? 'Di ba? Yung
Yes.
mga files mo na hindi mo man madali kasi nating sabihin yon na ilagay mo sa USB drive, mag-backup ka, but reality kahit ako hindi ako laging nagba-backup eh. Naiisip mo lang yung backup pero ang reality doon is it really takes regular backup, no? So ganoon maraming dapat gawin. So para tulungan natin sila on the predictive side and on the preventive side, 'di ba? So instead na sabihan natin sila, wag kayong mag-click ng ganito. Human na yan talaga. Lalo na kung mga 'di ba, mahilig ka sa mga bags tapos 50% discount ng Louis Vuitton.
Malamang si
Click mo
VP
talaga.
Sheila at si VP Mia nakaklik na yan.
Diba? So yun ang kailangan natin sa society. We need to be able to help the vulnerable sectors, no? Yun ang kaasamin yung BYOD nung pandemic. Kapag ginamit mo yung personal computer mo for office related na trabaho, hindi mo na personal computer yan. CISO na may-ari niyan. Diba? So we deploy all types of security measures that we deploy to endpoints. Diba? So yun ang yung tayo dito sa trabaho natin, we need to yung advocacy natin, kailangan paigtingin pa natin. Tapos siyempre, yung technology, kailangan umabot dun sa mga tao na nangangailangan.
Chair, since napag-uusapan natin in line of that topic, naalala ko lang, isa sa mga ginawa ni Friend Michael during the pandemic, isa yun sa mga nakita namin problem. Yung mga estudyante, everybody goes online. Yung mga teachers natin sa mga school, exam, and bigla sila nag-online na yun. So during the 2020 pandemic, isa sa mga activities ni Trend Micro na ginawa is nag-post kami ng mga sessions wherein ang invited namin would be students, teachers, parents, and tuturuan natin sila kung ano yung mga dapat at hindi dapat gawin in terms of ano ba yung posibleng nangyari, kapatid. So it's like more on informing them and giving them information kung ano ba baka pwede natin gawin. I can offer this to PixPro. We can set some schedule, hosted by PixPro together with Red Micro. Meron na kaming format na pwede natin gamitin. Let's continuously, educate or help the people understand cybersecurity. Kung paano sila makomprotektahan at kung paano nila maiiwasan.
Yun. So, yun ang isa sa pinaka-importante. Doon sa education side, doon sa awareness side, yung PixPro is our vehicle, no, to do that. But syempre, yung technology aspect, mayroong value chain na tumatawid na ngayon sa the likes of Trend Micro. Diba? Tapos kayo naman, mayroon din kayong value chain na the likes of the telcos, the likes of enterprise, and the likes of... Kasi kailangan bigyan natin sila ng solution na working. No? Kasi kahit na mura yung sabihin ito mura pero useless naman, that's still a waste of money, di ba? Kahit sabihin mong 5 pesos yan per month, kung useless naman yan, that's still a waste of 5 pesos every month. No? And every year, that's times 12 of your 5 pesos. Eventually, maiisip mo yan, pag tinamaan ka, ay anak ng teteng, di ba? Gamit ka, bayad ka ng bayad, hindi naman gumagana. Compared to a little bit more expensive, but working. And not only working, you will see the people behind the solution. Like ganito, makikita mo si Ian, si Paolo, no? Si Jessica, si Micaela. Makikita mo behind, yung mga tao behind. Hindi yung bentahan mo ng lisensya, nung na-download na, na-install na, bahala ka na sa buhay mo. Diba? Hindi dapat ganon. Kailangan makita nila, ito, bilhin ko to dahil nakikita ko itong mga taon to sa ganito, nakikita ko sa ganyan, and then I can ask questions if ever. Diba? So, you're not just selling license, you're selling a service.
Yes, sir. That's true.
Oo, yan ang natin, yung interaction natin, kailangan yung ganong interaction na feeling mo secure ka dahil may matatawagan ako Tatawagan ko si Alexis Bernardino. Punta lang ako sa Facebook page ni PixPro, magtatanong na ako doon. Di ba? And we are always online. That's the difference. Kasi we always respond and reply. Yan ang natin. Di ba, Jessica?
Yes, sir. Actually, isa din na naalala ko na laging nagiging problem ng mga users natin. Phishing. Di ba?
Phishing,
Yeah.
phishing. Ang dami.
Yes,
Ang
really,
dami.
everything.
And yeah, we need to educate those people, di ba? Kasi, yun nga, sabi natin kanina, hindi sila sanay with these kinds of, hindi nila na-encounter every day. Until such time that they are being breached, di ba? Yung marinig mo, may nakuhaan ng pera, ganyan. And because of that particular link lang na click nila on that email. So, yeah. Education and awareness talaga, sir.
Sabi ni Jaminola Fernando Jr., firewall and endpoint security should be synchronized. Plus, good ICT training of cybersecurity, human resources, good certification of staff is vital. Agree to the highest level, brother. No? In
Correct.
fact, not only firewall and endpoint security, everything must be synchronized, including the mindset of the people. They must be
Yeah.
synchronized.
Tama yun, sir.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oo.
So no
Paranoia to the
matter,
highest level.
yes, sir. So kasi no matter how good the tool is, kung talaga ang weakest link mo is yung person, kiklik at
User.
kiklik pa rin talaga niya yan.
And
Yes.
that is, Paolo, and that is the difference sa cybersecurity. Because the tools is just half of the story.
That's true,
What
sir. Yes.
completes the story are the people.
Yes, sir.
Because the analytics, the analytical minds of the human beings doing cybersecurity is really the one driving the improvement and the sophistication. Right?
Yes, sir.
Kasi yung kalaban mo tao eh.
Yes.
Tao yung
Actually,
kalaban mo.
yeah, sa amin nga sa Trend Micro usually, sabi nga namin, pwede ka nang maging mahusay na cybersec basta magaling ka, basta maganda yung common sense mo. Kasi mostly in cybersecurity, basta meron kang matinong common sense, huwag mong i-click yan, alam mong mali na yan, huwag mo nang gawin. So that would definitely make our job much easier. Kung pwede nga lang, sabi nga nila, ituro yung common sense most often than not. Kasi dyan tayo talaga nadadali.
Okay,
Technology.
sabi ni Rec Graphil, maganda yung questionnaire Graphil. How can you manage spreading the fake caller ID like they're using the fake SMS of banks? Magandang tanong
Manood
yan.
yata
Actually,
siya mamaya, Mr. Chair. 8 o'clock.
mamaya 8:40 may interview tayo kay Alvin El Chico tungkol diyan. But sabihin na rin natin. Anyway, nag press release kami nito eh. Yung tinatawag nilang smishing, no? Very rampant very few weeks back. But during that time na naging rampant yung smishing, at least sa amin, sa PLDT and Smart, it was still kasi pagka SMS related na issues, fraud bumabagsak yan eh. No? Pero about 3 weeks ago, so it's been ordered to be is considered as a cybersecurity matter. So immediately it landed on the lap of the CISO. So right there and then, decisions were made, and yung sinasabi nila na gumagamit ng banks, kasi we are monitoring. Meron chat group tayo with the CISOs of different banks. After that, until today, we can say na wala na kayong natatanggap. Kung naka-smart kayo, wala na kayong natatanggap na ang sender ID is bank name. No? Kung meron pa kayo natanggap, you let us know. You let me know. At very ang policy natin ngayon sa mga aggregators, no? Yan ang very clear na sinabi natin sa aggregators. If ever makatrace kami ng smishing coming from you, without question, ang CISO is authorized to suspend the access of the aggregator. So ganun lang ang ginagawa natin. So Rec, Graphil, kung meron pa rin, paki-send na lang dito kung meron. Anong ipadala mo sa akin yung text at saka yung recipient at saka yung timestamp at hanapin natin yan. Kasi so far sa CISO ng 4 na banks so far na majority na ginagamit noon, wala na silang nire-report. Ang meron yung individual numbers. Coming from individual numbers, hindi na coming from sender IDs ng mga fake sender IDs. So Mr. Rec Graphil, sa messenger ng Facebook, pwede mong i-report yan at action na natin agad yan. Okay, VP Mia and VP Alex. Andito pala si Tin, ha? Si Tin Feliciano, nakita ko sa kanina.
Martin.
Okay, Mr. Rec, kumusta dyan sa Coast Guard? Sige, ipadala mo sa akin yan.
VP Sheila, you want to say something?
Oh, yes, of course. So napaka-interesting, no? So I think I have 3 things that I want to share. First of all, I want to thank Trend Micro, Ian, and the rest of the team, no, for being our latest technology partner. And again, there's so many things that we can do together as part of this advocacy. Secondly, to Paulo's point kanina, no, na talagang the weakest link is the human element. In risk management, we classify the people or the humans actually as the highest asset, right? So my dream in cybersecurity, in risk management, is to change the mindset. Again, Mr. Chair, di ba? Ito yung lagi natin sinasabi. It's in the mindset. So if we can become the first line of defense kind of thinking, instead of being the weakest link, probably there's a huge gap that we can already address. And thirdly, yung slide kanina ni Paulo about the I love you virus, I think nasa high school pa lang kami ni VP Mia niyan. A trip down memory lane, I would say. So that was very famous. And if you research about it, it probably cost in the areas of $20 billion to $30 billion, just to, the havoc that it wreaked, right? And then the remediation. So I had the privilege of actually meeting the person who released the cure for that I love you virus. His name is Narinat. He's a Thailander. So he's from Thailand. And he's a really good guy. He actually released it to the public for free. So I'm sure na maraming natulungan yan globally. So again, with the last slide that I think Jessica presented a while ago, it's exciting to see that, the operative word now is the ecosystem or the integration, because not one solution can solve all the issues in the world. And it's always about innovation. I mean, from an antivirus company 20 years back, right? I mean, it's evolved now. And that's how our minds should actually do as well as an advocacy. We need to evolve. So again, thank you. VP Mia?
Thank you, VP Sheila. Very well said. Yes. VP Alex.
My take, actually the realization that I have, no, based dun sa discussion natin ngayon. Again, it boils down to to the point of always na tinuturo sa amin ni Mr. Chair is critical thinking, no? Kasi tools and technology, again, na-evade na siya, no, Paolo, no? So mas matatalino na yung mga hackers din ngayon, no? They evade already. Remember the SolarWinds hacks, no?
Sir.
Cisco, Microsoft, Dell, no? Sophisticated companies in technology and cybersecurity being evaded, no, and affected by those hacks, no? So meaning it boils down again to sa mga tao, kung i-apply naman natin sa personal nating buhay, yung pagiging critical thinker natin, mag-iingat tayo always sa mga kiniklik natin, sa mga ino-open natin, sa mga especially dun sa mga nasa bahay ngayon and not tech savvy, no? So, yun lang sa akin, VP Mia, extra caution and continuous vigilance across the community.
Yes. And before we say goodbye to everyone, no, we just would like to thank again the team of Trend Micro for being with us today. And also, I just would like to congratulate our NCR team for the initiatives that they are doing. You'll hear about it very soon. Congratulations, NCR Pix Pro team. Mr. Chair, yung isang slide ni Paolo kanina, yung may bed, tamang-tama dun sa sasabihin mo.
Okay, so maraming salamat. And we are very happy to welcome, of course, Trend Micro, the Trend Micro team as an addition to our technology partners. And we hope to maintain this relationship until such time na masasabi natin na we have improved the cybersecurity posture of the whole country, no? Through our partners and through the solutions being provided by the Trend Micro brand, no? And Paolo, thank you very much for your presentation. No?
Glad to be here, sir.
Yeah, very informative, no? In a very simple terms, and it's something that hindi mo na isipin ngayon kung ano dapat ba ginagawa mo? Unang-una, maging paranoid ka lang. Okay? Kung mahirap kang magkaroon ng common sense, at least maging matakutin ka.
Tama yun, sir.
Kasi kung wala ka na matakuti, hindi ka na, kung wala
Yan
ka ng
talaga,
common
sir.
sense, tapos hindi ka pa, matapang ka pa, delikado yun. No?
Delikado yun, sir.
Kaya hindi ako naglalaro ng poker kasi matapang ako eh. Talagang ano lang ako,
All in
ganun-ganun
agad.
lang ako. Yung
All in agad.
dati, basta hindi ako pwede sa mga ganon. So, tama-tama yung isang slide ni Paolo kanina. No? So ngayon, weekend na naman mga Kapix Pro. At lagi nating sinasabi, no? Happy weekend. Pero sa cybersecurity, happy lang, walang weekend. Maraming salamat. Ayan, then Micro Team, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pix
Thank
Pro.
you.
Mr. Chair. Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.